The thunder boomed like a cannon shot across the valley, sending Katherine Zimmerman rushing back to the porch as the first fat raindrops began to fall. She clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders, watching as the storm clouds rolled over the mountains surrounding Stockton, Colorado. It was 1883, and Katherine had arrived in this frontier town just 3 weeks prior, having journeyed west after her parents' passing left her with nothing but a small inheritance and a desperate need for a fresh start. Miss Zimmerman. "You'd best get inside before you're soaked through," called Mrs. Henley, the widow who owned the boarding house where Katherine had taken a room. Katherine nodded, taking one last glance at the darkening horizon before stepping back into the warmth of the house. The smell of beef stew permeated the air, mingling with the scent of fresh baked bread. Despite the comfortable surroundings, Katherine felt the familiar ache of loneliness settle in her chest. At 26, she had come to terms with the fact that she would likely never have the family she had always dreamed of. The doctor back in Philadelphia had been quite clear about that. "I've set out some mending for you on your bed," Mrs. Henley said, stirring the pot of stew. "Figure you might want to earn a little extra this week." "Thank you," Katherine replied with a grateful smile. The teaching position at the small schoolhouse paid enough for room and board, but little else. Every extra penny helped. As Katherine climbed the stairs to her room, her mind drifted to tomorrow's social at the church. Mrs. Henley had been insistent that Katherine attend, claiming it was high time she met more of Stockton's residents. The thought filled her with both hope and dread. Hope for new friendships, dread for the inevitable questions about her marital status and family plans. The next day dawned bright and clear, the previous night's storm having washed away the dust and left the air feeling clean and new. Katherine dressed carefully in her best blue dress, the fabric faded but still presentable. She pinned her chestnut hair into a neat bun at the nape of her neck and dabbed a touch of rose water behind her ears. The church social was already in full swing when Katherine arrived. Children ran about playing tag while women laid out dishes on long tables and men gathered in small groups, discussing cattle prices and weather forecasts. Katherine felt awkward standing alone, but plastered on a smile and made her way toward a group of women she recognized as mothers of her students. "Miss Zimmerman," called out Mary Watson, waving her over. "So glad you could join us. Have you met Samuel Holloway yet?" "He just returned from driving a herd up from Texas." Katherine shook her head, allowing herself to be led toward a tall man standing with several others near the oak tree. As they approached, he turned, and Katherine's breath caught in her throat. Samuel Holloway stood well over 6 feet, his broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist. His face was tanned from the sun, with laugh lines crinkling around startlingly blue eyes. A well-groomed mustache adorned his upper lip, and when he smiled, Katherine felt her heart skip a beat. "Miss Zimmerman, this is Samuel Holloway." "Sam, our new schoolteacher, Katherine Zimmerman," Mary said with a knowing smile that Katherine pretended not to notice. Samuel removed his hat, revealing thick sandy hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Zimmerman." "Folks call me Sam." "It's a pleasure, Mr. Holloway," Katherine replied, accepting his outstretched hand. His palm was rough with calluses, but his grip was gentle. "How are you finding Stockton?" he asked, his voice deep and pleasant. "It's quite different from Philadelphia, but I'm growing fond of it," she answered truthfully. "Philadelphia?" His eyebrows rose. "What brings a city girl all the way out to our little corner of Colorado?" Katherine hesitated, then smiled. "Adventure, perhaps, a change of scenery." Sam studied her for a moment, as if sensing there was more to the story. "Well, we're glad to have you. The children need a proper education out here. My sister's boy, Tommy, says you're the best teacher they've ever had." "Tommy is a bright child," Katherine said, warming to the conversation. "He has quite a talent for arithmetic. Takes after his mother in that regard," Sam said with a fond smile. "My sister was always the smart one in the family." Their conversation continued easily, and Katherine found herself relaxing in Sam's company. He told stories of his cattle drives that had her laughing, and listened attentively when she spoke about her teaching. By the time they parted ways several hours later, Katherine felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years possibility. Over the next few weeks, Katherine found herself looking forward to her encounters with Sam Holloway. He would tip his hat to her on the street, stop by the schoolhouse to help with repairs, and occasionally walk her home from church on Sundays. The townspeople had begun to take notice, and Katherine overheard whispers about the schoolteacher and the cowboy more than once. On a crisp Saturday in early October, Sam appeared at the boarding house door with his wagon. "Miss Zimmerman, I was wondering if you might like to join me for a picnic today," he said, hat in hand. "The aspen trees are turning gold up in the foothills, and it's a sight worth seeing." Katherine glanced at Mrs. Henley, who gave an encouraging nod. "That sounds lovely, Mr. Holloway. Let me get my shawl." The ride into the foothills was pleasant, with Sam pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the area's history. They found a perfect spot overlooking a valley where golden aspen trees shimmered in the breeze against a backdrop of evergreens and rocky cliffs. As they spread the blanket and unpacked the basket of food Sam had brought, fried chicken, fresh bread, and apple pie, Katherine felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. The conversation flowed easily between them, and when Sam reached over to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear that had escaped from her bun, she didn't pull away. "You know," Sam said as they watched a hawk soar overhead, "when I first saw you at that social, I thought to myself, now there's a woman who doesn't belong in a rough place like Stockton, but I was wrong." "Oh," Katherine raised an eyebrow. "You've got more grit than most folks born out here," he continued. "Taking off across the country alone, starting fresh in a strange place, that takes courage." Katherine looked down at her hands, or desperation. Sam's expression softened. "Want to tell me what really brought you west, Katherine?" It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about the way he said it made her want to tell him everything. So she did about losing her parents to influenza, about the failed engagement to a man who'd cared more for her inheritance than for her, about the doctor's devastating news regarding her ability to bear children. After that, there didn't seem to be much point in staying, she concluded. Every social gathering became an exercise in pity or awkwardness. Poor Katherine, no parents, no prospects, and no possibility of children. I couldn't bear it anymore. Sam was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "Do you know why I've never married?" he finally asked. Katherine shook her head. "Been raising my sister's children since she and her husband died in a fire 5 years back. Tommy and the twins, Sarah and Susanna." He looked at her then, his eyes serious. "I never found a woman willing to take on 3 ready-made children. Most want their own." "They're wonderful children," Katherine said softly, thinking of how well-behaved and kind the Holloway children were in her classroom. "They are," Sam agreed, "and they deserve a mother who'll love them for who they are, not resent them for who they aren't." In that moment, Katherine felt something shift between them, a deeper understanding, a recognition of shared values. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Katherine's life. Sam courted her properly, with flowers and walks and dinners at the hotel restaurant. He introduced her properly to his nieces and nephew, and Katherine found herself falling in love not just with the handsome cowboy, but with his makeshift family as well. When Sam proposed on Christmas Eve, presenting her with a simple gold band set with a small pearl, Katherine accepted without hesitation. As they stood in the glow of the Christmas tree at the town gathering, Sam's arms around her waist, she felt a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. The evening of their engagement, after the celebrations and congratulations, Sam walked Katherine back to the boarding house. Standing on the porch, sheltered from the gently falling snow, Katherine gathered her courage. "Sam, before we go any further, I need to be certain you understand what marrying me means," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I'm infertile. I can never give you children of your own." Sam's expression didn't change as he took her gloved hands in his. "Katherine, there are many children needing love in this world. Tommy, Sarah, and Susanna already adore you. If we're blessed with more children someday through adoption or other means, that would be wonderful. But you are enough for me, just as you are." Tears filled Katherine's eyes as Sam pulled her gently into his arms. His kiss was tender, a promise of the life they would build together. They were married in the spring of 1884 with wildflowers decorating the small church. Katherine wore a cream-colored dress she'd sewn herself, with lace collar and cuffs sent by a friend from Philadelphia. Sam looked handsome in a new suit, his normally wild hair tamed for the occasion. Tommy served as best man, proudly standing beside his uncle, while the twins scattered flower petals down the aisle. After a brief honeymoon in Denver, they settled into Sam's ranch house a few miles outside of Stockton. The house wasn't large, but it was solid, with 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a wide front porch that caught the evening breeze. Katherine took to ranch life with determination, learning to cook on the temperamental wood stove, tending a vegetable garden, and helping with the lighter ranch chores when she wasn't teaching. The children adjusted to having Katherine as their new mother with varying degrees of ease. Tommy, at 12, was respectful but sometimes distant, still missing his parents acutely. 9-year-old twins Sarah and Susanna were more openly affectionate, delighting in having a mother figure to teach them lady things, as Susanna put it. One evening in late summer, Katherine found Tommy sitting alone on the porch steps, staring at the stars. "May I join you?" she asked. Not wanting to intrude on his solitude, he nodded, scooting over slightly to make room. They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the crickets and watching fireflies blink in the gathering darkness. "You want us to call you Mother?" Tommy asked suddenly, his voice cracking slightly as it had begun to do in recent months. Katherine considered her response carefully. "I would never presume to replace your mother, Tommy. Elizabeth was a wonderful woman who loved you very much. I'm honored to be your aunt by marriage, and I hope that someday you might think of me as a second mother, but you should call me whatever feels right to you." Tommy nodded, seeming relieved. "Uncle Sam says you can't have babies of your own." The directness of the statement startled Katherine, but she appreciated his honesty. "That's true." "Is that why you married Uncle Sam, because he already had us?" "No, Tommy," Katherine said gently. "I married your uncle because I fell in love with him. His kindness, his strength, his humor, all the things that make him who he is. And yes, I've grown to love you and your sisters very much, but that wasn't why I said yes when he proposed." Tommy seemed to consider this. "The other boys at school say it's strange that Uncle Sam married the teacher." Katherine smiled. "Do they now? And what do you think?" A small grin tugged at the boy's mouth. "I think they're just jealous because I get help with my homework." Katherine laughed, and after a moment, Tommy joined in. When Sam came out to find them, attracted by the sound of their mirth, his face broke into a wide smile. "Now that's a sight that warms my heart," he said, sitting down beside Katherine and slipping an arm around her waist. That night, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, Katherine told Sam about her conversation with Tommy. "You were right to be honest with him," Sam said, tracing patterns on her arm with his fingertips. "He's a thoughtful boy, needs to work things through in his own time." "I hope I said the right things," Katherine murmured. "You did," Sam assured her. "Being a parent isn't about having all the answers, it's about being there, listening, and loving them through the questions." Katherine nestled closer to him, marveling at how this man who'd never had formal education could be so wise about the things that truly mattered. Life settled into a rhythm on the Holloway ranch. Katherine continued teaching during the school year while managing the household. Sam worked the ranch with his small crew, raising cattle and horses. The children grew and thrived under their care. In the winter of 1885, tragedy struck the neighboring Johnson family when both parents died of pneumonia within days of each other. leaving behind 3-year-old Elijah and infant Rose. With no relatives willing to take the children, the town council met to discuss their fate. "They'll have to go to the orphanage in Denver," Mayor Billings said gravely. Katherine, who had come to the meeting with Sam, felt her heart constrict at the thought of the 2 small children being sent away to an institution. "They could stay with us," she said suddenly, looking at Sam. "At least until proper arrangements can be made." Sam didn't hesitate. "We have the room, and Katherine's experienced with children. We'd be happy to help out." The relief on the council members' faces was evident. By nightfall, Katherine found herself rocking baby Rose to sleep, while Sam helped Elijah settle into Tommy's room. The plan was temporary, a few weeks at most, until the children's aunt could be located in California. Those weeks turned into months as letters went unanswered. The aunt was eventually found to have moved to Oregon with no forwarding address. By then, Elijah had become Tommy's shadow, following the older boy everywhere, and Rose had begun to call Katherine Mama and Sam Dada. On a warm spring evening, as they sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard, Sam took Katherine's hand. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Those children need a permanent home." Katherine nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She had been thinking the same thing, but hadn't wanted to presume. "I know we didn't plan on this," Sam continued, "but sometimes life has other ideas. What would you think about us adopting them, making them Holloways for good?" Tears filled Katherine's eyes. "I think it would be the most wonderful thing in the world." The adoption process was surprisingly straightforward, given the circumstances. With no relatives coming forward and the Holloways being respected members of the community, the judge was happy to grant their petition. By summer's end, Elijah and Rose Holloway were officially part of the family. The years passed in a blur of activity and growth. Tommy grew into a tall, thoughtful young man who excelled at mathematics and eventually went off to study engineering in Denver. The twins blossomed into beautiful young women with very different personalities, Sarah quiet and artistic, Susanna outgoing and practical. Elijah, who had Sam's knack with horses, became an essential part of the ranch operations, while Rose, with her quick mind and determined spirit, reminded Katherine so much of herself that people often forgot the girl wasn't her biological daughter. In 1890, their family expanded again when a Ute woman arrived at the ranch carrying a newborn baby. She explained in halting English that the child's father was a white trader who had abandoned her when she became pregnant. Knowing she could not return to her people with a half-white child and unable to provide for the infant herself, she had heard about the Holloways and their generous hearts. "Please," she said, holding out the tiny bundle to Katherine, "give him good life." Katherine looked at the beautiful baby boy with his shock of black hair and copper skin. Without hesitation, she took him into her arms. "What is his name?" "No name yet," the woman said. "You give name." Sam, who had been standing silently beside Katherine, placed a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. "Are you certain this is what you want?" The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. "No place for him with my people. No place for me with his father's people." Katherine exchanged a look with Sam. "There could be a place for both of you here," she said softly. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "Both. A child needs his mother," Sam said kindly, "and we could use another pair of hands around the ranch. There's a small cabin near the creek that you could fix up for yourselves." The woman, who told them her name was Singing Bird, eventually agreed to stay. She named her son David, after hearing the biblical story of the young man who faced impossible odds. Over time, Singing Bird became an integral part of the household, teaching the children traditional Ute crafts and stories, helping Katherine with the endless household chores, and eventually taking over the management of the ranch's extensive vegetable gardens. As the children grew, the ranch prospered. Sam's innovative breeding program produced horses that were sought after throughout Colorado and beyond. Katherine, who had eventually given up teaching at the schoolhouse to focus on their growing family, started a small school on the ranch itself, teaching not only their own children but those of the ranch hands as well. In 1895, tragedy struck when Sam was badly injured by a spooked horse. For weeks, Katherine feared she might lose him, sitting by his bedside day and night praying for his recovery. When the fever finally broke and the doctor declared him out of danger, Katherine wept with relief. Sam's recovery was slow. The injuries to his leg meant he could no longer ride for long periods or handle the more physical aspects of ranching. It was a difficult adjustment for a man who had spent his entire life in the saddle. "I'm half a man now," he said bitterly one evening as Katherine helped him from his chair to the bed. "Samuel Holloway," Katherine said firmly, "you are twice the man most could ever hope to be. You've raised 5 children who adore you, built a successful ranch, and become the most respected man in the county. A bad leg doesn't change any of that." Sam looked at her, the anger in his eyes softening. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" Katherine smiled. "Years of practice dealing with stubborn students." The accident forced changes at the ranch. Elijah, now a capable young man of 18, took over more of the day-to-day operations. Sam focused on the business aspects, using his mind rather than his body to keep the ranch profitable. Katherine watched with pride as he adapted, never surrendering to self-pity for long. By 1900, their family had expanded yet again. A pregnant young woman named Clara had arrived at their door one stormy night, having been directed to the Holloway Ranch by the town doctor. She was unwed, disowned by her family, and desperate. Katherine and Sam took her in without question, helping her through a difficult birth and supporting her through the early weeks of motherhood. When Clara announced her intention to head to San Francisco to start fresh, she made a surprising request. "I want to leave Emily with you," she said, referring to her infant daughter. "I can't give her the life she deserves. Are you certain?" Katherine asked, even as her heart yearned for the sweet baby girl. Clara nodded, tears in her eyes. "I've seen how you are with children. Emily will have everything here: siblings, stability, love. Please give her what I can't." And so Emily joined the Holloway family, becoming Rose's little sister in all the ways that mattered. Clara wrote occasionally over the years, eventually marrying a kind shopkeeper and having more children. She never returned to Colorado, but expressed gratitude in every letter for the Holloway's kindness and for the updates and photographs they sent of Emily's growth. As the new century dawned, Katherine sometimes marveled at the twists and turns her life had taken. The young woman who had arrived in Stockton, convinced she would never have a family, now sat at the head of a table surrounded by children and grandchildren of various ages, backgrounds, and bloodlines, but all Holloways in their hearts. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Sam surprised Katherine with a locket containing a family portrait on one side and an inscription on the other. "Love makes a family. Do you ever regret it?" Sam asked as they sat together on the porch swing after the anniversary celebration, the house finally quiet after the last guests had departed. "Marrying a rough cowboy and taking on all these children," Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder, her hand finding his. "Not for a single moment." "Even with all the hardships, the lean years, the injuries, the heartbreaks, especially with those," Katherine said softly. "Those difficulties showed me the strength of what we built together. Love isn't just about the easy times, Sam. It's about standing together through the storms." Sam squeezed her hand. "I thank God every day that you came west, Katherine Holloway." Katherine smiled. "As do I." In the spring of 1905, their family gathered for Tommy's wedding to a lovely young woman named Alina who taught at the school in Stockton. Katherine watched with pride as her oldest child, for that was how she thought of him now, stood tall and handsome in his new suit, pledging his life to the woman he loved. At the reception, held on the sprawling lawn of the ranch house, Katherine found herself momentarily alone, watching the festivities from the shade of an old oak tree. The ranch had grown substantially over the years, now encompassing several thousand acres with a herd of prize cattle and horses that were famous throughout the West. The original house had been expanded multiple times to accommodate their growing family, and a cluster of smaller homes housed their adult children and ranch hands. "Penny for your thoughts," came Sam's voice as he approached, 2 glasses of punch in hand. "I was just thinking about that church social where we first met," Katherine said, accepting the offered drink. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" Sam chuckled, settling beside her on the bench. His hair was now more silver than sandy, and the lines around his eyes had deepened, but his smile still made her heart skip a beat. "I knew from the moment I saw you that you were special, Katherine. But no, I couldn't have imagined all this." He gestured to the scene before them, their children and grandchildren laughing and dancing, the prosperous ranch stretching out in all directions. "You've given me more than I ever dreamed possible. We gave it to each other," Katherine corrected gently. At 68, Sam moved more slowly these days, his old injury bothering him in cold weather, but his mind remained sharp and his love for her unwavering. "You remember what I said to you when you told me you couldn't have children?" Sam asked, his voice soft with memory. Katherine nodded. "You said there were many children needing love in this world." "I had no idea how prophetic those words would be," Sam said, his gaze taking in the 5 children they had raised together, plus singing Bird and David, who had remained part of their extended family. Between them all, the Holloways now counted 15 grandchildren, with another on the way. "Life has a way of working out better than we plan," Katherine said, leaning against his shoulder. "When I left Philadelphia, I thought I was leaving behind any chance of having a family. Instead, I found one larger and more wonderful than I could have imagined." "We did good, didn't we?" Sam said, a note of wonder in his voice. "We did very good indeed," Katherine replied, watching as Tommy swung his new bride in a circle, both of them laughing with joy. The celebration continued as the sun began to set, painting the Colorado sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. The younger children chased fireflies while the adults danced to the music of a local fiddle player. Katherine and Sam remained side by side, occasionally greeting guests and family members who stopped to chat, but mostly content to watch the fruits of their life's work enjoy the evening. They had faced hardships over the years' droughts that threatened the ranch, illnesses that had scared them badly, financial worries during the lean times, but through it all, they had persevered together. As the night grew later, their youngest grandchildren began to nod off in their parents' arms. Tommy and Alina prepared to leave for their honeymoon trip to Denver. The family gathered to see them off, shouting good wishes and tossing flower petals as the couple climbed into the waiting carriage. "Take good care of each other," Katherine called, embracing Alina and then Tommy. "We will, Mother," Tommy said, the word coming naturally to him now after so many years. "We learned from the best." After the newlyweds departed and the last guests had gone home, the family gathered on the wide front porch of the ranch house. David strummed a guitar while Sarah led them in singing old favorites. Katherine looked around at the faces illuminated by the soft glow of the lanterns her children, now grown with families of their own. Singing Bird, her dark hair streaked with silver, the grandchildren, some dozing, others still bright-eyed despite the late hour. "I have something to say," Katherine announced when there was a lull in the music. All eyes turned to her. 23 years ago, I arrived in Stockton believing my life would be solitary, that I would never know the joy of having children or the blessing of a loving family. She paused, emotion making her voice catch. "I was so very wrong." Sam reached for her hand, giving it a supportive squeeze. "Each of you came into our lives in different ways," Katherine continued, looking around at her children. "Some by birth to others, some by circumstance, some by choice. But all of you became Holloways not through blood but through love, and that, I've come to believe, is the strongest bond of all." "Hear, hear," Sam said softly, raising his glass in a toast. To family, Katherine said, lifting her own glass. To family, they all echoed, even the sleepy little ones who didn't quite understand but didn't want to be left out. Later that night, as Katherine and Sam prepared for bed in the quiet house, Katherine found herself reflecting once more on the journey that had brought them to this point. "What are you thinking about now?" Sam asked, catching her thoughtful expression as he eased himself onto the edge of the bed. "I was remembering that doctor in Philadelphia who told me I'd never have a family," Katherine said. "How devastated I was. How I thought my life was over before it had really begun." Sam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That must have been a terrible burden to carry." "It was," Katherine agreed. "But now I see it was actually the beginning of something wonderful. If I had been able to have children of my own, I might never have come west. I might never have met you. I might never have opened my heart to all the children who needed us." "God works in mysterious ways," Sam said, quoting one of his favorite phrases. "Indeed he does." Katherine smiled, settling beside her husband. "Our family may not have come about in the traditional way, but I wouldn't change a single thing about it." "Nor would I," Sam said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Every child who came to us was exactly the child we needed, exactly when we needed them." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, listening to the distant hooting of an owl and the soft creaking of the old house settling. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Sam finally said. "What's that?" "That our children have learned from our example. Look at how they've opened their own hearts and homes. Sarah and her husband taking in those 2 orphans from the mining disaster. Susanna and John helping that young, unwed mother get back on her feet. Even Tommy and Alina talking about adopting after they're settled." Katherine nodded, warmth spreading through her chest. "The legacy continues." "All because you were brave enough to share your truth with me that day," Sam said softly. "And I was wise enough to recognize what a treasure was being offered." "We were both exactly where we needed to be," Katherine murmured. As they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, Katherine thought about the young, heartbroken woman who had boarded a train to Colorado all those years ago, believing her dreams of motherhood were forever shattered. If only she could have glimpsed the future that awaited her: a house overflowing with children's laughter, a husband who loved her completely, and a family bound together not by blood but by choice, by commitment, by love. "Thank you," she whispered to Sam, though he was already asleep, his breathing deep, "and even thank you for showing me that families come in all shapes and forms. Thank you for giving me the family I never thought I could have. Thank you for proving that love, in the end, is what truly makes a family." Outside, the stars shimmered in the vast Colorado sky, bearing silent witness to the extraordinary life that had unfolded beneath them, a life that had begun with a simple confession and an equally simple truth. "I'm infertile," she had confessed to the cowboy, and he had replied, "There are many children needing love." And together, they had loved many indeed.